I remember sending songs to Chet Atkins and Roy Clark and Buck Owens, even when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. I saw the Iranian Revolution firsthand. I lived through it when I was 16, 17 years old. I tell people that I was in the Dave Matthews Band even before Dave Matthews. And Dave clicked his Heineken bottle to mine and said, if anyone ever asks me about that, I will back you up 100%. First of all, you've got to make the music as good as it possibly can be. This is all something I knew nothing about 2.5 years ago. My learning curve has been not so much a curve, but rather free climbing the face of El Capitan at Yosemite, just going straight up.
He's been a screenwriter, a novelist, worked in private equity, and now, in a way, has had almost 2 separate music careers. He's been a musical mainstay in Prague and has traveled all around the world. Please welcome George Collins to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you. Chilly, but very well.
Yeah, I get the sense that it's very cold over there in Prague.
We're having an unusual cold snap, colder than usual.
Yeah, and so the first question that I normally ask people who come on is just, what was your first experience with music like, or what really made you find a passion for music?
Well, okay, I can remember this very clearly. In December of 1965, okay, I was 4 years old, and I have older brothers and cousins, and they were into music, although they are not musicians, but they brought home the new Beatles album, Rubber Soul. And my earliest childhood memories are of me sitting in our basement, listening to this album obsessively on our hi-fi, and just falling in love with, first of all, that album, with the Beatles, and with music and songwriting generally. And I got my first guitar that Christmas and started writing songs immediately.
Yeah, awesome. And what, like, I mean, obviously it's probably much different from what you do now, but writing songs at 4, like, what was that sort of like? Was there any rhyme or reason to it, or were you sort of just playing around with the guitar?
No, I was determined to be a songwriter from a very early age. I remember 8 years old begging my parents to buy me a subscription to a now defunct magazine, but it was called American Songwriter. And I recorded my songs on a very basic cassette player and submitted them to songwriting contests, even when I was 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah,
So it's been
yeah.
in my blood for a long time, long time.
Do you still have those cassettes around anywhere, or like any recordings of these older songs?
Not those, not from my childhood. The earliest things I have are when I went into a studio and recorded some demos when I was 18, which I submitted to a number of music companies and producers. In fact, you may recall Don Kirshner from Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. He was a big music producer. He was the guy behind the Monkees and the Archies. Don Kirshner's Rock Concert back in the 70s and 80s. Well, he lived in the town next to me, and I knew exactly where he lived because he was a customer at this pharmacy where I was a delivery clerk. So I knew where his mansion was out in the Horsey estate country.
Yeah.
And so after I recorded these demos, I put a packet together, excuse me, and drove out to his place, not in the pharmacy's delivery vehicle, of course, but in my own, and dropped them off in the box where I knew that he had people monitoring and collecting his stuff. I never heard back, but I was always in eternal hope that sending my music out would somehow land me something somewhere with someone. I remember sending songs to Chet Atkins and Roy Clark and Buck Owens, and even when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. So I've been at it for a while, although not continuously.
Yeah, it was a lot harder work back then to send it out compared to now when you just like upload it online and it's like you're sending it out to the world, like to everyone.
Right. But however, one still has to do a lot of research to make sure that you're targeting the right people, and never do a mass email. It
Yeah.
has to be carefully crafted, carefully tailored, and that's the challenge today.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned living near some of these musical grades, but in your childhood you didn't move around a lot as a kid. Can you give us like the full list of
Uh,
where you lived and what that childhood was
no, we
like?
we we did move around quite a bit, actually. I was born in Washington, D.C., and very quickly we moved up to northern New Jersey when my father got transferred to New York City. And we were there for a few years, and then back to suburban Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. We were there for 5 years, and then back to northern New Jersey, the same town, where this is where I mostly went to high school in the 70s. Although we moved overseas to Iran in 1978, what was to be a 3-year assignment, that got cut short by the Iranian Revolution. And so I saw the Iranian Revolution firsthand. I lived through it when I was 16, 17 years old. I also had the opportunity to travel all around Europe and Asia during that time, and that's where I got bitten by the international bug, you could say. Came back
Yeah.
to the US, finished high school in northern New Jersey, went down to Virginia to matriculate at the University of Virginia in 1980, finished there with a double major in English literature and music in 84, played in a bunch of bands, including an 11-piece Earth, Wind, and Fire-esque band called Common Knowledge, in which I was the only white member. But at the time, I had gigantic ringlets, dark ringlets like Brian May from Queen, and so that was my honorary afro, and they let me in the band. But the interesting thing is, I mean, the band was very, very good. We had some extremely talented musicians, in particular the drummer and the lead saxophone player. We had 5 horns, and after we sort of drifted apart and everyone went their separate ways, I went back to grad school, and the drummer Carter Beauford and the saxophone player Leroy Orr hooked up with a local bartender named Dave Matthews, and they became the founding members of the Dave Matthews Band, and went on to conquer the world while I was studying international business and law. But I did meet Carter and Dave at their most recent concert in Prague a couple of years ago. Leroy unfortunately passed away in an accident a couple of years back. But I was backstage with Carter, and we had a great time catching up. And he gave me his drumsticks, his personalized, customized drumsticks, and
Yeah.
we keep in touch. So anyway, that's
That's
my
awesome.
claim to fame. When I was backstage with them, I said, I tell people that I was in the Dave Matthews Band even before Dave Matthews, and they just burst out laughing. And and Dave clicked his Heineken bottle to mine and said, "If anyone ever asks me about that, I will back you up 100%."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then all through grad school, I was uh, I was playing music in bars and clubs all around Charlottesville. Usually as a solo acoustic artist, I made good money doing that. Supporting myself and paying my way through school. Um, but at that point, I no longer no longer was considering pursuing a career as a professional musician or songwriter. I'd done that for some time, and I was a little bit disillusioned and frustrated. And I saw a number of other musician friends of mine who were sort of drifting into toxic patterns with alcohol and drugs, frustrated at their lack of success. And said, there's a lot of other things I can do with my life, and especially I want to have an international career. So I pursued that and sort of put the music aside more as a hobby than as a career at that point.
yeah. Well, and it
And then I
seems,
moved to Prague in 1992, and with the exception of 2 years in London in the late 90s, I've been in Prague ever since.
Hey, if you're like me and you're interested in the YouTube or creator space, you should check out The Published Press. The Published Press is a completely free newsletter founded by YouTubers Colin and Samir. They host their own podcast talking to some of YouTube's largest creators. They've edited some of the best content I've seen on YouTube, and now they're sharing their knowledge about the YouTube space with you for free. The Publish Press comes out 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with everything going on with your favorite creators and platforms. And like I said, it's completely free. Just enter your email address to receive the Publish Press whenever it comes out, and that's it. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below, sign up to the Publish Press, and get all the info you need on the industry.
Hearing you talk about like traveling internationally, like getting all these degrees, going to school, like still keeping up with music, it just seems like you're a very academic or just like generally curious person. Is there anything, any one thing that you think like makes you so curious or wanting to learn?
I've always been that way. I'm a voracious reader, and when I was a boy, my 2 older brothers are just a year apart, so they always shared a room, and I had a room by myself. I was a couple years younger, and I shared my room with the family bookshelf. And so there were, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books next to my bed, and I read them all. And to this day, most of my knowledge of history and culture and geography and everything else comes from my
Those
youthful
days in the
reading, which I,
bookshelf.
exactly. And then, of course, in college, I you know I studied English literature, and then I got a master's degree in English literature. So a lot of reading, in particular with poetry and drama, but from all eras and genres. I was studying a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of medieval literature, a lot of the romantics and the moderns. Yeats was and remains one of my favorites. I wrote a thesis on Nietzsche and Yeats, and so yeah, I've got an academic bent, but I still try and make my work accessible as much as I can.
Are you a music artist trying to find a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible? Then check out DistroKid. DistroKid is a super user-friendly and super easy-to-use service that will make your music available in stores like Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, Snapchat, everything. Everything you could imagine, it's available. People will even be able to add your songs into their Instagram stories. DistroKid helps you with the distribution, monetization, and promotion of all of your music. Use the link in the description of this video for 7% off any DistroKid package you want. Pick from musician packages designed to help artists get their own music out there, or even get a label package where you can manage up to 100 artists from one profile. So that's more for like managers, labels, and you can also get the musician package that I mentioned earlier, which is more for artists, producers, things like that. It's super easy, and you can get 7% off any package right now with the link in the description of this video. So once again, if you're looking for a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible, I'm talking any platform you can think of, get DistroKid and get 7% off right now with the link in the description. Back to the program.
You mentioned it earlier, I think, but like you take not time off, but you sort of move music to the side. You're working in the corporate world, you're learning all these new things, and then eventually you do like sort of a big show that makes you want to get back into music. What about that performance specifically made you want to start trying to pursue music again?
Right. Well, I had a wonderful career in finance and investments for about 20 years, from 1992 until around 2013. My first child was born in 2012. And as I was looking ahead to that event, I decided that there were a number of things happening professionally and personally at that time. And I decided that it was a good time for me to step aside from my the partnership in my investment firm and pursue personal ambitions. That is to return to my writing and my music, and also to be a full-time dad. I mean, I'd been working crazy hours and traveling constantly, and I did not want to miss my children's growing up. And I was feeling during that time sort of the bubbling up of my creative impulses. I started writing my first novel when I was already, still working at the firm, and of course, it was difficult to find the time to do that, but it made me all the more determined to pursue that. And then with the music, one of my best friends here in Prague owns a very popular bar and club, and he was having every year, 4th of July, big cookout in his garden, and with other, with entertainment, live entertainment. And one year I said to him, if I commit to getting back into music and, relearning the songs and getting back into, developing my performing skills, will you book me for next year's 4th of July gig? And he said, sure. He wanted to encourage me. So I did that. So I worked my butt off in parallel with the fiction that I was writing. And I played that 4th of July show the following summer. And it was extremely emotional for me because no one in Prague knew that I'd been a musician. They only knew me as a, private equity professional,
Yeah.
financial executive. And, they used to see me in a elegant suit with French cuffs. And when I show up with jeans and a guitar and start singing Neil Young and Bruce Springsteen tunes, they all, just fell over in shock and surprise. But it went really, really well. And after the show, I remember I was sitting there, everyone had left, and I had to pack up all my gear. And I was just sitting there with a tumbler of scotch and just reminiscing about, the many, many hundreds and hundreds of shows I played back in my student and post-student days. And I said, yeah, this feels really, really good. And I've got to get back into this in a serious way. And that's what I did. Sort of
And
the
it's something you really wanted to do. It wasn't just the Scotch talking.
No, it wasn't the Scotch. Of course, the Scotch helped, but it was the
Yeah.
reminiscing about the gigs from back in my student and post student days. I said, yeah, I've got to get back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I feel like a lot of people, whether they were even pursuing it professionally or not, like have an interest in music or making music to some degree, and then put it on pause for a career-oriented goal or something else. If there's someone else who's in a similar situation where they put a pause on music and now they're thinking of getting back into it, or that it's something that they want to do, what advice or like words of encouragement would you give to them?
Well, first of all, I'll just continue with the story for a little bit because that goes to addressing your question. Um, Now I've got a place in Key West, Florida, and I've had it since 2007. And my wife and I go there now with our kids. We spend as much time there as we can. And through many of our friends there, I've become very good friends with some real A-list songwriters from Nashville who come down to Key West every spring. It's usually the first week of May for the Key West Songwriters Festival. And I met a couple of these, guys. And these are Grammy Award winning and nominated songwriters. I mean, A-list, and writing for all the big stars. And I recorded a couple of my original tunes in a studio here in Prague. I went to a studio and recorded professional quality demos, and I sent them to these guys. This was 2018. Okay, so it was a couple years after my sort of return gig, and I was performing around town at least several times a year. Not terribly active, but at least once every couple of months, I was performing around Prague, just sort of easing my way back into it. But I had a young family at home. I was living overseas, and my idea was that I would, possibly write songs and become a staff writer with a publisher. In the same way that with my fiction writing, I was pitching my novels to literary agents, primarily in New York, with the goal of getting signed to a publishing house and publishing my novels following the traditional route. So that's how I was thinking, because I had a very 80s and 90s mentality, because that was, when I was active in the industry.
Yeah.
But the industry had changed. And my friends from Nashville listened to the songs and said, look, these are really good, but they're kind of singer-songwritery. And by definition, singer-songwriters write and record their own music. So we can't think of anyone to pitch it to. And we really can't think of any publishing house that's going to sign you. It's got its own style. Why don't you just record it and release it yourself as an artist? And I had no idea that that possibility even existed with the technologies available today. I was not on social media. I did not have Spotify or YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Music, nothing. I just have, and I'm looking over my shelves here, probably a couple thousand CDs, and that's always how I consume my music.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can't even find a CD player. But anyway, so I said, okay, well, how am I going to do this? And that's when I stumbled across a program that was oriented towards sync licensing, which I'm sure you know about, but maybe your listeners may not. Sync licensing is the placement of songs in TV shows, films, advertisements, video games, etc. And if you think about it, anytime you're watching a show or a movie or an ad, there's music in there. Well, someone has to find that music and get it there, and someone is getting paid for that music. And I said, well, this is something that I can do being overseas. I don't have to, I'm not going to form a band anytime soon. I'm not going to tour anytime soon, apart from the much more frequent gigs that I'm now doing here in Prague.
Yeah.
But I said, I can record my music and get it on these digital platforms and release it across, Spotify, SoundCloud, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, what have you, and also pitch my music to music supervisors who are the gatekeepers in the world of sync. Now, everyone and their brother has been piling into this business in recent years, because sync licenses, tend to pay, a couple $1,000 for a placement, whereas you would need millions of streams to make that much money on Spotify. And so everyone's piling into sync. It's a crowded space. It's hard to get the attention of music supervisors, but I plug away at it. In fact, I've got a call at this time tomorrow with a music supervisor, and I'll be pitching my music to her. So anyway, the way that this gets back to your question is you've got to explore all these different, first of all, you've got to make your music as good as it possibly can be. Okay. And what I have done is I have taken and am still taking a number of courses and programs about songwriting. Okay? I'm in a number of programs. For example, the Songwriting Academy based out of the UK. I've done some work with Songtown, which is based in Nashville. A number of other speed songwriting and a couple of other, very, very good courses and programs that have helped me improve my songwriting chops. I also take courses, online courses, on improving my skills as a singer and as a guitarist. So there are a number of online teachers, and you've got to do the research and find the teachers that resonate with you in terms of their style, their approach, their personality. But there are several singing and guitar playing courses that I do, regularly, and they have really, raised my game considerably. And I've also taken a lot of courses in music production, but I must confess, I'm looking here at all this gear I've got sitting around my desk. It remains in their boxes because I simply don't have the time to learn Pro Tools and to learn all these other programs. And so that's on my to-do list, but I realized, it would take me 5 years to learn how to record radio-ready music at home. Whereas, fortunately, I've got the financial resources to work with external producers and session musicians And that's what I do to bring my music to life. Although I am determined to start doing more and more of the home recording. But anyway, all these resources are out there. And believe me, once you sign up for one program, you're going to start getting bombarded with emails from everybody else because they all cross
Yep.
promote. They all cross promote, and it's over and over and over again. I get, I'm working with one of my songwriting mentors, and then, I get a bunch of emails about sync placements and sync licensing. So, well, I'm already in that course, delete. But you're going to start getting so, and you'll see it's a fairly small universe of at least the high quality teachers, instructors, programs. Also, the music marketing guys. Okay, I'm in a bunch of programs about music marketing, and I work with them. So that all keeps me busy. And this is all something I knew nothing about 2.5 years ago. So my learning curve has been not so much a curve, but rather, free climbing the face of El Capitan at Yosemite, just going straight up. And
Yeah.
that's what it's been. Um, but, one of the very first things I did, and I was reading a wonderful book. There's a music producer and he teaches courses on music production named Bobby Owsinski, Owsinski, and he has some very good books about the music business. And I would also highly recommend Ariel Hyatt's book about music promotion and publicity. She just updated it, and it's fabulous. And also, there's a bunch of other wonderful books that I read. Uh, but one of the things I learned very early on was that I had to have a social media presence, and so I
Yeah.
reluctantly signed up for all the platforms. And what I did was I took a look, based on what I've been reading in the books. Oh, by the way, there's another great book by Ari Herstand, Herstand, called "How to Make It in the New Music Business," and he just came out with the third edition of that book, and that's fabulous. Every indie musician should have that book, as well as Ariel Hyatt's Hyatt and Bobby Owsinski. Okay, you got to have those books if you're going to just avoid making paralyzing mistakes and wasting a lot of time and money. And I have wasted a lot of time and money. I signed up for a lot of platforms that I never used, and after a year or two of paying monthly fees, I say, I'm not doing this. Boom, delete. I can do this myself, or someone else is teaching me a better way to do it. But
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom. But a lot of this trial and error that you have to do yourself. But when I signed up for social media, what I learned was that it's very, very important that you find a brand name, and there are courses about branding and all this. Um, but you find a brand name that you can use across all your platforms. That's critically important, and use similar photographs so that listeners, viewers, can see your photo, they see the name, and they can find your URLs very easily. So what I did at the very beginning was I did a search, and I found that there's a bunch of other guys out there named George Collins, uh, including a very talented fellow from the UK who's a student at Berkeley, and he's a very gifted musician, very gifted. But all these guys have George Collins platforms. So I said,
Yeah.
okay, how am I going to distinguish myself in my music? And I found that George Collins Band was available everywhere. So I branded myself as George Collins Band, even though I don't at the moment have a band. But my music is rock, and I work with producers and session musicians. And so, I'm not just like an acoustic
Yeah, I was
singer-songwriter.
gonna say, in that way, you're sort of a band. You are bringing in these other people to help make your songs come to life. It's
Exactly,
not
exactly. And
all
I mean,
just you, and so in that
yeah,
way, you're a band.
yeah. I mean, for example, obviously Dave Matthews has a working band, and these guys are on the road, 9 or 10 months a year. But you take a look at others like Steve Miller Band and whatnot, uh, or Bob Dylan and his band. And so I figured, okay, no one's going to get upset that I brand myself as George Collins Band. But that's what I had to do to get access to all the platforms. And then you got to learn how to once you've made the best music you can make, okay, whether it's by yourself or with third-party producer, and it's radio ready. It has to be radio ready for Spotify and for sync placements. Demos don't cut it. Okay, it's got to be radio ready. And once you have the music as good as it can be, then you have to learn how to work with the digital services. Like I use DistroKid, but CD Baby is also very good. I have a lot of friends who use TuneCore and other platforms like this. You've got to set up your accounts and get them verified with Spotify, Amazon, Apple, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, YouTube, etc. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. You got to register with what's called a PRO, which is a performance right organization. In the US, these are BMI and ASCAP. If you take a look at any, there's also CSAC, but that's Canada. But these PROs, they're the ones who collect royalties for your publishing. But then you've also got to sign up with other platforms, for example, Song Trust, Sound Exchange, because there's a very intricate number of different royalty streams out there. Mechanical royalties, which there's different royalties for streaming, like Pandora, or Sirius Radio. And these go into different pots. Okay, and you've got to find these agencies. You got to register your songs with them, and so they can collect the royalties on your behalf. So there's just a lot of administration, and I know that a lot of indie musicians freak out about this stuff. They say, "Oh, I just want to create," and so they just write their song, they record it, and they blast it out there without doing the necessary legwork to promote it, make sure that it's registered properly, make sure it's copyrighted properly. Don't just, yes, a song is in theory copyrighted if the day you write it, but if you want to be able to go after someone one day for stealing your song, like Marvin Gaye's heirs did, you got to have it copyrighted. You can't go to court with just say, oh, it's on my hard drive on this day. No, that doesn't work. It has to be copyrighted. So there's a lot of conflicting and bad advice out there, which is why I recommend that you follow people like Ariel Hyatt, Ari Hairstand, Bobby Osinski, Rick Barker is also very, very good, and follow them. John Ozaka with Music Marketing Manifesto, very, very good programs. I also work with Hyped It, a platform created by a fellow named John Gold, who's an indie musician. And that's what I use as sort of the AI and backend for running Facebook and Instagram ads. It makes it very intuitive, very easy to set up, instead of just grinding your way through the whole process, which is very painful, doing it directly on the platforms. You pay a very modest fee, and John Gold Software, Hyped It, HYPEDDIT.com, can set it up for you. So anyway, these are things I've learned over the way, but I benefit, I think, unlike many other indie musicians. I mean, I have an MBA and a law degree, both from top 10 schools, and I worked my butt off to complete those degrees. And then I spent 20 years in finance, and I was also doing a lot of legal work. I never practiced law, but on the deals I was doing, I was reviewing contracts daily and telling our lawyers what to do because of my training. And so I'm not intimidated by data. I mean, I've taken MBA level courses in marketing. I've taken law school courses in contracts, and so I know about how to cross my T's and dot my I's. And although what I'm doing now with music marketing is completely different from what I was studying in my MBA program 30 years ago about how to market soap, or I didn't want to get a job at Procter & Gamble or something like that. But I'm not intimidated by data or crunching numbers and working through these things, which are necessary, unless you're Ed Sheeran or Dave Matthews, sort of came up as a legacy act, and you've got an army of people around you to do everything for you. If you're indie, you got to do this stuff yourself. And
and it is a lot of behind the scenes work that it isn't always talked about. I mean, I personally just a couple months ago learned about like PROs and got, signed up for one and got all that settled. But it was a thing that like everyone I started talking to about it was like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And so it definitely is interesting to, or important, not interesting, to get the word out there, make sure people are
Yeah,
doing what they need to in order to
you
collect
got to
on
get the
the
admin
creative
and the
things.
promotion, the admin and the marketing right. Uh,
Yeah.
to support, I mean, if you're going to make the best music you can, then you owe it to the music and to yourself to, build a fan base and make sure that you're marketing to them and that you've got, all the back end stuff set up properly so that once people start enjoying your music and streaming it or what have you, viewing it on YouTube, you can actually get paid. Not a lot, but you will get something.
Yeah. And I want to get into some of the specifics of your music and what you have released and put out there. One, I mean, with all that you explain, all these courses you took, the books you're reading, corporate world, creative world, like you have done so much over your life and career, and your song "Where Have I Been All Your Life" sort of talks about that, like being so wrapped up in your work and whatnot that you're trying to balance that with being present for your family. Have you learned anything about like how like good ways to balance those two things and not miss out on personal moments for professional opportunities?
That's a very good question, and it's something I continue to wrestle with. Um, that song "Where Have I Been All Your Life" started out as a very clever play on words. I thought, hey, that barroom phrase, "Hey, baby, where you been all my life?" I just inverted it and thought I
Yeah.
would write a clever song about that. But as I started writing and the lyrics started flowing, it actually became personal and quite autobiographical. And I realized that I'm, with all the work coming to being an indie musician, I was shortchanging my family and my goal of, leaving the, you know, financial world to spend more time with my family and on my creative pursuits. Um, well, if I'm spending all day on Instagram and Spotify and doing back end admin and promotion, then I'm not fulfilling that promise
Yeah.
and that goal. So it's something that I continue to wrestle with. And in fact, I just the other day, one of my New Year's resolutions is to spend less time on social media. It was becoming a little bit obsessive. I went from zero to having around 4,300 friends on Facebook, 2,000 or so on Instagram, 2,000 on LinkedIn. I've now got over 3,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, 3,000 people on my mailing list, because I've been promoting these things and I've been successful at bringing people into my world. But it takes a lot of time if you're going to try and engage with everyone personally.
Yeah.
And eventually you reach a point where you just can't do that. When I get an email from Ed Sheeran, I know that he's not the guy sending it to me. And if I write back, he's not going to be the guy, seeing the reply. Now, of course, there are other artists in different, different tiers and stages of their career who do manage these things, especially indies. And so I'm trying to strike that balance between, okay, how much time am I going to spend engaging with, my fans? Okay, and I use that term, kind of with a smile, but that's actually, what I'm doing. I'm building up an audience of people who enjoy my music, and it's extremely gratifying when I get comments on social media and YouTube and elsewhere, people who really love my music, total strangers, and they write to me, and I always try to write back personally. But I can't follow every one of my Facebook friends and engage with them meaningfully. That's 4,000, 4,300 people, and you know, I'm not going to be able to do that and still write my songs and get them recorded. Uh, and I've got this novel, which has been uh, I just need to make some final edits. But it's been sitting there in this, 98% completed stage for several years. And it's like, okay, all I need is 1 week of no distractions, no interruptions. I can finish it and get it up. Okay. But if your day is frittered away with, posting and replying to emails and chasing, it's like, well, that ain't going to happen. So you've got to, and a lot of the music coaches I work with promote this idea. You've got to work in what they call chunking, time chunks. Okay. And it's something that you also see in business and personal development and all sorts of areas. It's not just related to music and indie musicians, but you've got to block out time where you're focusing on one thing and only one thing for a certain amount of time. And Ari Hairstan in his podcast explores this very well. But you've got to sort of take a look at, for example, a weekly schedule. Say, okay, during this week, I'm going to practice my guitar for 5 hours. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to practice 1 hour a day for 5 days. It can be, 2.5 or 3 hours certain days, but with very clear objectives about the practicing. You don't just sit there and noodle around. You got to know what you're doing. Similarly with your vocal training, similarly with your songwriting. Okay, I'm going to block out one afternoon for all, catching up with my admin and my promo. Okay, boom. Not just constantly frittering, checking emails, checking, because that's a recipe for disaster and procrastination and not getting anything done. So yeah, these are things that I'm thinking a lot about because I realized last fall that I was spending way too much time. I mean, it got even worse after I wrote and released the song "Where Have I Been All Your Life." It got even worse for a while. And I just said, okay, this is just not sustainable, and something's got to give. And what's going to give is, on the one hand, social media, less posting, less engagement. Sorry, I posted the other day with a video that I released to everyone saying, hey, you're going to be seeing a bit less of me, but when I do post, it'll be worthwhile. And then, I've got to finish this new album and I've got to finish my novel. So, I'll keep you posted on these things. But, I was posting
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a day, which is, some of these music coaches, recommend that, but that's just insane. You're never going to get your work done if you're obsessively posting and engaging. You've
Well,
got to.
that and it's the whole conversation of quantity versus quality. Like there is,
Exactly.
I mean, forget about even music. There are just general like influencers or YouTubers that I follow that, years ago when it was still popular, they would be on the whole like daily upload thing. They would like one video every single day. It's like 10 minutes long or something like that. And now a lot of them are a lot more sparse. Maybe it's
Right.
once a month or once every 2 months. And
Right.
it's on the one hand, yeah, I miss having something new every day that I can watch. But I look at these more recent videos and every single one of them is just objectively a much better video
Right.
and is so much more engaging and interesting than the ones that they were putting out during that
Yeah,
whole
exactly.
grind period.
One of my
And
favorite writers on this subject is a fellow by the name of Cal Newport, and he's written many books. He's actually a professor at Georgetown University of computer science and IT, and yet his shtick, if you will, is he has a book called Digital Minimalism, and it's exactly about scaling back your footprint so that you can do what he calls in another one of his books deep work. And so that then another one of his books is So Good They Can't Ignore You. And that's really his thesis. Step back from the digital world, focus on your work, and then make it the highest quality you can make it, and quality over quantity. And so I've been really paying a lot of attention to his books, and he has a podcast too, calnewport.com, and which is really excellent, just about how to stay focused. Whether you're a musician, a writer, a professor like he is,
in
these
whatever
these
area
tools and
of work
techniques
you're
are
in.
universal, and I'm trying to follow that. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's something I'm still working on. but I'm committed in 2024 to striking that better balance.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I want to talk to you about, I mean, you do so much, it's hard to get everything included in a short 45-minute, hour-long, whatever podcast. But you have this really unique program that's truly unlike anything I've ever seen before, called Pink Snapper Blues, that you do. Can you just, for people listening who may not know, can you just explain what that is and sort of what goes into that?
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I'm actually working on a new one. Uh, as I mentioned, I pitch my music regularly to music supervisors, and last year I met a fellow by the name of Mike Burns, who's a music supervisor in Hollywood. He works with a number of big programs and production companies, and he's also a movie producer and a film director. So he's made movies with really big names like Bruce Willis and some other A-list stars. And he was developing a really innovative concept called Movipods, which is essentially um, a podcast that's like a movie. So instead of being interviewed like we're doing now, or other kinds of like a political roundtable or something like that, uh, what he was trying to develop is something more akin to the radio shows from back in the 30s, 30s and 40s, when people were tuning into radio for their entertainment before
Yeah,
TV. And so the idea is that when people are on their podcast platforms, they could listen to these episodes, 15 to 20 minutes long, and they're extremely entertaining. And he's doing two different types. One is what he calls Movipod musicals, and that's what Pink Snapper Blues is. So there are 6 episodes, and what we did when we spoke about this, and he signed me up last spring. He found out that I've got a place in Key West, and he grew up in Miami, and he knows Key West very, very well. So he goes,
yeah,
okay, well that's our plot line. It's going to be loosely based on a lounge lizard local musician at the regular headliner at the Pink Snapper Bar and Grill, who realizes that he has to change his womanizing ways in order to find true love. But when love comes knocking, it's trouble in paradise. So we
yeah,
developed a script together with the screenwriter, and we created the audio version across 6 episodes. And so I did the voiceover for the lead character Colin, and we worked with other voice actors and actresses to create the other characters. Lots of sound effects and everything, so you really think that you're in a bar or you're on the street with motorcycles zooming by or what have you.
yeah,
Uh, and and they all integrate my songs. So each story, each episode has one or two of my songs stitched into the plot line at certain moments. So it's kind of like like back in the day, the Monkees or whatever, where there's a story and then they cut to a song and then they come back to the
yeah,
story. And it was a lot of fun to create. And we released the 6 episodes each week between mid-November and late December this past year. And it's now all 6 episodes are available on all podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, we're about 50 others. It's everywhere. So you just type in on whatever platform you like, Pink Snapper Blues, and it'll pop up, these 6 episodes. Uh, I'm actually working with Mike Burns on a follow-up. It's not Pink Snapper Blues, but I've written a screenplay version of my first novel, which is called Playing the Changes. And it's what I call a jazz-infused love story set in Boston, about a neurosurgeon and how he has to recreate his life as a jazz saxophonist after hitting rock bottom. And it's got a lot of jazz music in it, and it's winning, not winning. It's a finalist in a number of screenwriting competitions and festivals. So it's getting attention. It's getting traction. I think it's quite good, and I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that one day it'll be produced. But what we're doing with this Movipod is we're going to create again about 6 or 8 episodes. I'm doing the voiceover for the lead character. There will be many other characters, a lot of jazz music in the background, supporting the story. And then it will be on the podcast platforms. We hope by mid next year. And if it gets enough of an audience, the idea is that we can use that to pitch the screenplay to production companies in Hollywood, saying, "Look, we've got 50,000 people have listened to it and they like it. Let's make a movie. Let's make the movie version."
Yeah.
So that's the goal with that one. And in the meantime, I'm writing the songs for my next album and trying to finish that novel.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I mean, it seems like you're in the middle of working on so much. You mentioned this album, novel, this next upcoming podcast. I mean, stories, release dates. What can you tell us about anything you're working on or what's upcoming for you? What fans can, expect and look forward to?
Well, my latest single, my new single that came out on December 1st is called "My Wish for You," and it's a song that I wrote. It's a love song for my daughters that recalls. It's got great horns, and it's got sizzling slide guitar that recalls, George Harrison, Tom Petty, Traveling Wilburys. I actually worked with one of my songwriting mentors, who's one of the best guitar players in the UK, and he agreed to play the slide on that track. And I was very fortunate. All the tracks on the EP that's currently rolling out, which is called Songs for Grown-Ups, they all feature horns that were written by a fellow named Lou Pomonti, a Canadian guy who does the horn and string arrangements for international superstar Michael Bublé. So he brought his A game to the arrangements. He brought his A team to the studio, and he himself is regarded as one of the finest Hammond organists, in the world. And so those tracks really benefit from his participation and that of his team. So "My Wish for You" came out, and that was a song that I started writing the day my first daughter was born 11 years ago. And I was on the way back from the hospital after witnessing the miraculous birth. And at that time I was working on my novel, my first novel, but I had not written a song in 20 years. Since moving overseas, I had not written a new song. But all of a sudden, I started getting this download about what I had just witnessed and my goals and wishes for my daughter. And I sat down on a stone wall around the corner from the hospital, and I was in the habit of carrying a notepad with me everywhere for scribbling notes related to my novel. So I just wrote down, a bunch of lines, and I still have that paper to this day because I never throw anything out, much to my wife's annoyance. But anyway, it was basically the chorus of the song that arrived fully formed. I could download. I made some tweaks, later, but most of it was right there. But I set it aside, and had another daughter a couple years later. And when I was working on the new EP, Songs for Grown-Ups, I said this song fits thematically with Songs for Grown-Ups, because it's Songs for Grown-Ups, the collection of 6 tracks, is written from a mature perspective, written songs about long-term relationships, marriage, the challenges of rearing children, and the challenges of getting older. And
Yeah.
so all these songs were, it was a direct riposte to the TikTok generation and the superficiality and short attention spans. I said, no, I'm going to write songs about things that matter, and that's what I set out to do. So that song, which I think it's beautiful and hooky, came out on December 1st, and it's getting a lot of attention. My next single will come out on March 1st, and that's called "Scarred for Life," and that is it's a rhythm and blues tune. and it's my homage to the great R&B and soul singers of the late '60s and early '70s. You know, I grew up listening to the Beatles and the Monkees and Herman's Hermits and the Stones and the Who and all these great bands from the '60s and '70s. But I also listened to a lot of Motown, R&B, and soul. I mean, I remember the day when Otis Redding died. You know, I was 5 years old. You know, I remember that as well as I remember when Jim Croce went down a few years later, or when John Lennon was killed a few years after that, and Leonard Skinner. I mean, these were for me, you know, life altering events, uh,
Yeah.
traumatic. But you know, I was listening to a lot of Al Green, Otis Redding, you know, Sam and Dave, James Brown, you know, and you think, you know, what's this white boy in the white red suburb doing listening to, you know, these guys? And I just loved it, and I still love it. And so I wanted to write a song, you know, with my homage to this genre. And I had the title "Scarred for Life" kicking around for some time. But what's interesting is that it's not about physical scars. It's about mental toughness and about becoming stronger through overcoming adversity. That's why, you know, the scars we have make us better at living life. We're scarred for living our life. That's the
Yeah.
point of the song. And it's a slow R&B tune in 6/8, again with some great horns and some really great guitar work. I'm looking forward to releasing that in March 1st. And then in May, the last single from the forthcoming EP, it's called "Saving the Best for Last," appropriately, and it's a fist pumping anthemic song. You'll hear Springsteen, you'll hear Van Morrison, you'll hear Cat Stevens. It's a very positive song about you know, again, overcoming adversity, but you know, preparing for the next stage of life, you know, a later stage of life, and saying, okay, you know, I may be getting older, but I'm actually getting better. And
Yeah.
you know, all the lessons I learned in my youth, I'm now actually able to apply them. And it's about, you know, moving into a new phase and being, you know, the bridge is actually "Here I am, better than ever. Here I am, better than ever. Here I am." And then there's a big modulation, and then a big horn solo, and then da, 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 da. So it's a wonderful
Yeah.
song. I like it a lot, and I'm very excited to release it. And then I'll be releasing the EP, the collection of all 6 tracks, in over the summer. That will come out in July, and then hopefully, if I'm able to finish the next batch of songs, which I'm writing, you know, diligently, I start rolling out the new tracks, which I've not yet recorded, but I have written many of them in the autumn.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like your fans have a lot to look forward to get excited for, on top of everything you've already released and worked on that they can enjoy. I mean, those are all the questions I had for you today. So anything you want to shout out, promote, let people know where they can find it, feel free to do that now.
I would just say, you know, my website is www.georgecollinsband.com, and that has links to all platforms and all my social media. You can find me on Linktree / George Collins Band, and that's where you can also find links to all my music and Pink Snapper Blues and everything. And also the Linktree is on all my social media as well in the bio. So I'm pretty easy to find if someone wants to track me down. And if someone, you know, enjoys what they hear, then please follow me on Spotify or Apple, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can sign up for my email list on my website. I call it my community. And there's now over 3,000 people that I'm in touch with. I'm sending them occasional updates and bonus tracks, you know, for free downloads and alt versions and all sorts of things. You know, it's not overwhelming. It's just, you know, from time to time, and you can unsubscribe anytime, so don't worry about that. But I'm easy to find, and easy. You'll hear from me if you reach out. You'll hear from
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. I'll leave a link to some of that down below, and I'm looking forward to these new songs coming out throughout, this year.
me. Thank you, and don't forget to check out the other songs, the ones I've been releasing over the last
Yeah.
year and a half. They're all
Yeah.
there.